Okay. Take one. In September 2007, Dark Horse Comics released the first issue of its newest limited series, The Umbrella Academy Apocalypse Suite, created and written by Gerard Way pre-My Chem days and illustrated by the incredibly talented Gabriel Ba. It was so successful that it even won the Eisner in 2008 for Best Limited Series. Since then, the duo has come out with The Umbrella Academy Dallas in 2008 and The Umbrella Academy Hotel Oblivion 10 years later. Then in 2017, Netflix announces their adaptation of The Umbrella Academy. On its release, The Umbrella Academy was Netflix's third most popular series. Old fans had mixed feelings about the adaptation, as fans tend to do, and new fans flocked to the material like crazy. And now we're here, talking about The Umbrella Academy after its first season hit big. The fourth installment of the comics is underway, and the second season has finally dropped to a lot of applause. Hi, I'm Fernanda. I'm a writer and a big fan of The Umbrella Academy, both the comic books and the TV series, a rare feat indeed. But what I'm really a big fan of is well-written characters, and when it comes to The Umbrella Academy, the series is a masterclass on how to write well-developed characters while juggling a large cast. I really want to sit down and break down why the Hargreaves kids are some of the most compelling characters on TV right now. I'm going to break down each of the characters, tell you why I think they were successful in Season 1 and Season 2, and what I think will probably come to pass in terms of these character arcs in Season 3. In virtually every manual about writing, you'll see these things come up a lot. A character needs to want something, there needs to be an obstacle in their way from that desire, and they need to change by the end of the narrative. It has to go deep into the psyche of the character. This change cannot just be something shallow. So the question is, how do we figure out how that character will change? So, enter the title of this video. So you might have heard this one of 3 different ways in the past. What's a character's flaw? What's their weakness? And if you're a little bit fancy, you might even know, what is the character's ghost? You might be asking yourself, why am I not going to use the term ghost? It's actually pretty simple. When we ask the question of what is a character's ghost, a lot of the times the answers that come up are kind of vague and just really hitting the broad strokes of things without really going too deep. So if I were to ask, what are the Hargreaves siblings' ghosts, then the answer for all of them would be Reginald Hargreaves. Okay, then why won't I use the question, what is the character's flaw, or what is their weakness? Well, to be honest, when those questions are asked, we don't really go further past surface level. It is very much a shallow question. So the answer to what is the character's flaw will sometimes just be they're an addict, they're a smart aleck, they have poor self-esteem. When we ask what is a character's insecurity, we're going way deeper. We're asking, where does the ghost and the flaw meet on the graph? Basically, a character's ghost is responsible for that character's insecurity, but that character's insecurity is responsible for the character's flaw. So again, where do the Umbrella Academy kids' backstories and their personality traits, which are really just coping mechanisms, where do these intersect? This is where I really think the Umbrella Academy is a clear and concise and very, very masterful class on how to approach characters. this is probably the point where some people are ready to fight me in the comments. A lot of my own friends don't think that the characters are written well, and they will argue and say that the characters being written poorly is what makes the Umbrella Academy series adaptations such a bad adaptation. But I really don't think so. Let's break this down one by one. So I went back and I rewatched the first season in the series in order to prepare for this video, and also to prepare for rewatching the second season. And as I was doing that, I realized something. All 7 of the characters have the same 3 insecurities with slight variations as we break things down a little bit further. I'll go ahead and start with the obvious ones. I have a feeling you're already thinking of one of the Hargreaves for this one. Go ahead, I'll give you a moment. Just picture one in your mind. Honestly, this is the one that's the most common throughout. You have a basically 50-50% chance of getting this one right. You ready? Okay. Let's start by breaking this down in numerical order. Luther Hargreaves, the golden boy with the golden boy's superpowers. He's the team's number 1 with the brawn to back it up. He was always told by his father that he was number 1 for a reason, and needs to cling to that idea to cope with the trauma he's undergone as one of the academy. Luther's biggest insecurity comes from this deep-seated fear that he might not be the best. He isn't special. He's a fraud who doesn't deserve to be number 1. And if he isn't number 1, then who is Luther Hargreaves? Our boy suffers from a severe case of imposter syndrome. Season 1 showcases Luther's insecurity left and right by just showing him desperately cling to what the Umbrella Academy used to be, who he used to be. He's desperate. All because he's scared to find out what's left of him without the comfort of the number. This is drilled into the viewer's head so deeply that when Luther starts to fall from grace during the first season, he goes to Klaus and tells him that he wishes he was number 4 instead.
I want to be like you. I want to do whatever it is that you... No, you don't. You always seem so carefree, and I just need an idea. I want to be number 4.
What Luther is saying in that moment is that he wants the lack of responsibility that comes with not being number 1. The lack of pressure that comes with being number 4, being the family screw-up. Nobody can push you off of the pedestal of being number 1 if that pedestal does not exist. What could be worse than being the best? Obviously, it's being second best. From the moment Diego was given the role of number 2 in the Umbrella Academy by his father, he has been doomed to want the title of number 1. It's why, like Luther, he's the only one who hasn't moved past the academy days. While Luther is up on the moon doing what he's been told to do, Diego is out fighting, being a vigilante, and continuing the mission. No numbers, no family, just him. You can't be number 2 if you're all you've got. Diego's biggest insecurity is that his father was right. He isn't good enough. He needs to know that everything he's trained for, everything he's done in life, especially his own choices, especially the choice to be a vigilante, means something. He may not be the Umbrella Academy's number 1, but he's special and he's good in his own right. It's why whenever he's confronted with this question of how good he is, the swagger he's worked so hard as an adult to cultivate and to build just completely breaks.
I'm sure she'll be proud to know that you're killing Hazel and Cha-Cha as a way to honor her memory.
In the first season, he and Luther butt heads the most because of the title of number 1, but not just because of the title of number 1, it's because they're constantly battling out for that recognition that comes with the title. Wanting the validation that comes with being the best, however, is different than needing to be the best, and that's where we get to 5. As soon as we're introduced to number 5, we meet a tempestuous guy who's too smart and too busy saving the world to slow down for everyone around him. Even in the first flashback we get of 5, we see him fight with Reginald because he's just been told to not use his powers for something he knows he's capable of doing. He's smart. Smarter than all of his siblings, and smarter than probably even he thinks in that moment, his father. But all that being the smartest person in the room does for him is send him decades into the future with no way of getting back home. He becomes the smartest person in the world. Not because he's the smartest, because there is no one else left to compete with. One of the first things we ever hear 5 say in the season is,
Dolores kept saying the equations were off. Bet she's laughing now.
There's a reason for that. As the oldest in consciousness, at the very least, he knows his pitfall is this need to be right. It's what got him stuck in the future in the first place, but he just thinks his main problem is that he thought he was smarter than his father. The only 2 people he's ever considered smarter than him are these 2. And that's really only because they proved him wrong. The handler and the rest of the Temps Commission are just a means to an end for him. He's the one with the situation completely under control, which is how he manages to outwit them in the end to get out of his contract. So you'd think he'd be happy, but once he's back with his family, being with them isn't enough of a reward for his efforts. He still needs to stop the end of the world. Unfortunately, everyone around him in his mind is incapable of helping him because they ask too many questions he doesn't have the time to answer. But there's also the problem that they just won't listen to his orders mindlessly. In the first season, he basically goes solo in his mission to prevent the apocalypse, hoping that he's right and assuming that he's the best hope humanity has. 5's biggest insecurity is that he has to be the best, because he needs that control in order to save everyone. In the 45 years he goes without his family, he doesn't actually learn his lesson. He learns that his father is smart, smarter than him at least, but nobody else has any brains. In the 45 years he spends without his family, he doesn't really work through that issue. And when he's back with them, it's hard to break that mentality of needing to be in control at all times. So the next 2 siblings that fit our next insecurity are really just 2 sides of the same coin. The 2 women in the family grew up having very different lives. While Allison was number 3, a member of the Umbrella Academy, Hollywood actress, it girl, Vanya grew up constantly being told she was nothing. Even as a violinist, she will never be good enough for first chair. However different these 2 may be, they do have one thing in common. Their self-worth is tied to how good they are. How is this any different from Luther and Diego, you may be asking? A lot. Let's start with Vanya. She spent most of her life believing she was the extra in the Umbrella Academy. Her lack of abilities, isolation from her siblings, and inability to succeed at even ordinary goals, like becoming an author and her career as a violinist, have slowly chipped away at her.
We've been through this before, number 7. I'm afraid there's just nothing special about you.
Over time, she's not just internalized what her father said to her, she's grown to envy everyone around her, especially her family. Anytime we see her as a child, she is constantly watching her siblings do cool Umbrella Academy things together, while she's the odd one out. And as an adult, she struggles to find her place in her family, even after she discovers she's had abilities all along. Even with the superpowers, she's still not a part of the Umbrella Academy. Allison, in compared to Vanya, seems to have everything worked out for her. She's got the status as both a superhero and as an actor. She's the only one of the Hargreaves who ever married and had a family, and she's generally liked. Not only that, but for anything she doesn't have, she can just use her powers to get it. So then, what's the issue? On the surface, it might look like Allison wants nothing more than to be perfect, but that's just a symptom. Her character flaw is without a doubt needing to be seen as faultless. But more than anything, Allison just craves a normal life. The superhero thing is cool, but she blames a lot of her life's problems on her powers. For her, it's as addictive and as destructive as Klaus's addiction to drugs and alcohol. As an actor, she doubts her ability because she often used her power as a shortcut. As a wife and mother, she failed because, as she said, she has this power that really anybody else in her position would have used. And so on and so forth. When it comes down to it, her life is in the broken state it is because she's number 3, not because she's Allison Hargreaves.
But now I know nothing in my life was real. So I'm starting over. I just didn't think it would be so hard.
This craving for normalcy comes out even in her first interaction with the Academy. While all the guys are focused on their mission, sticking it to their dead father, or saving the world, Allison's main prerogative is connecting with her family. She welcomes Vanya and tries to mend that relationship. She has a funny moment with Klaus. She tries to reconnect with Luther. Well, the point is, more than everybody else, she wants to have a normal family. She's tired of being special. She's tired of being number 3. All Allison wants is a normal life with a normal family. She craves the peace that comes with being like everyone else in the world. And then there was one. Well, no, 2. So, why am I ending with Klaus and Ben? Well, it's pretty simple. These 2 were kind of the hardest ones to pin down, if I'm being completely honest. You may also be wondering why I haven't delved into season 2. Well, this is why. Luther, Diego, 5, Allison, and Vanya were super easy to read. I realized pretty early on into my rewatch of season 1 that the season was about 3 things. Number 1, showcasing these characters. Number 2, showcasing their relationships. And number 3, showcasing each and every single one of their insecurities. All 5 of them share the same ghost, Reginald Hargreaves. Luther's flaw is that he needs to follow the path his father set before him because his biggest insecurity is not being the best. Diego's flaw is his flair for Batman-esque dramatics because his biggest insecurity is never being the best. 5's flaw is his inability to trust anyone he deems dumber than him because his insecurity is this obsession with being the best to stay in control. Vanya's flaw is her self-loathing because her insecurity is that she's always been and may always be the outsider. Allison's flaw is her pursuit of perfection because her insecurity is that she needs to be perfect in order to not be an outsider to normal society. It's all pretty cut and dry. One of my main thoughts around Klaus was that his insecurity probably had something to do with him being the family burnout. I wondered if maybe it was something to do with him feeling like he wasn't useful, but then that thought was quickly squashed when I started watching season 2. Fair warning, going forward, we're going into some deep spoiler territory for season 2, so if you don't want to be spoiled, this is probably the place for you to stop watching. I had a few hunches about what Klaus and Ben's insecurities were. For a while I had dismissed my gut instinct, but I went back to it by the end of watching the seasons. So first, let me start by proving myself wrong. Klaus is in no way concerned with being useful. When we see Klaus's time in the 60s laid out at the start of the season, it becomes clear that being useful and needed is not something he actually cares about. He hates being a cult leader. He hates having to be responsible for a large group of people when it comes down to it. And it isn't because he's afraid he'll fail. His biggest proclamation is that the world will end in 2019, and as far as he knows at that point, he's actually right. So what about Ben? Does he even get enough screen time to be a part of this analysis? Like, duh. I will admit, though, Ben was pretty tricky. He talks about how useless he feels in this in-between state as a ghost a lot. He's constantly complaining and telling Klaus how lucky he is because he has the agency to be useful. And I'm sure many people thought that his story closed out when he saved Vanya for that reason. But as soon as Ben left the screen, I knew, in my gut, that this wasn't at all the last time we'd see him. And I was right.
Who the hell are these assholes?
Here's the thing, every single one of the Umbrella Academy's insecurities makes itself known, not just in the first season, but in the flashbacks as well. And that was the key to figuring out what Klaus and Ben's whole deal was. Vanya feels excluded, Diego struggles with a stutter, and Five snaps at Reginald. You know who else we get to see some deep dive stuff in the flashbacks?
Have you overcome your fear of the dead?
You really have to do this? Come on, Ben. There's more guys in the vault.
I didn't sign up for this.
Their insecurities have absolutely nothing to do with a fear of failure or a fear of fitting in. Their biggest insecurities, their biggest fear, is their power. Klaus's biggest insecurity is his ability to commune with the dead. It's why he's an addict. The addiction is a result of him trying to cope with the fact that he's so terrified all the time of seeing dead people and of being forced to commune with the dead. Addicts don't just happen for the heck of it. Addiction is a thing that happens when people struggle to find a healthy way to cope with mental health struggles. It's a salve, a form of self-medication. For Klaus, that means erasing the thing he fears most, the dead. The mausoleum scene is heartbreaking not just because it's clear abuse, but because you see the abject horror on Klaus's face. When he starts to experience withdrawal when Hazel and Cha-Cha kidnap and torture him, seeing the dead again is what depletes him far more than anything else his captors do. The thing with Klaus, though, is that death very literally haunts him. One of his siblings dies young, his father dies, the man he loves dies. The only times his powers are bearable are when there's finally an opportunity for them to offer him some comfort. It's why we only see him use his powers for himself in the first season to keep Ben around and to see Dave. He wants nothing to do with other ghosts, not even his father. Ben, on the other hand, we don't actually see him really use his powers in the first or second season, just a couple times here and there. The times where we do see him use them in the first season, it's a thing he fears as a child and a tool later that can be used by Klaus. Even in season 2, he'd rather pick Klaus up himself than use the tentacles. This may not seem like enough evidence, but what really grounded to me that Ben's biggest insecurity was this fear of his powers was that flashback scene we got in season 2 of Klaus bringing his ghost back. He and Klaus clearly had a really close relationship before Ben passed. The fact that Klaus doesn't share that Ben's ghost is around for a long time has to come down to two things: his constant need to reject his power, and that he probably felt closest to Ben beforehand. They both talk about feeling useless, they both have two of the most horrific abilities, and they're the only ones of the siblings who didn't like using their powers. When Ben finally crossed over to the other side and admitted he'd been able to leave the entire time, it really cemented for me the idea that Ben's character arc had nothing to do with being useful and everything to do with fear. It's why, huge spoiler alert, when the season ends, Emo Ben is introduced. Season 1 was all about displaying these characters, their dynamics, relationships, flaws, the ghost, and their biggest insecurity. The thing that season 2 did so well is that it shows these characters accept those insecurities for the first time. They're growing, but slowly. Luther being called out on his daddy issues doesn't get a defensive reaction out of him anymore. In fact, he wants to distance himself from his father after his father rejected him when he saw him out in the 60s. Diego obsesses less about comparing himself to his sibling's standard and perfection now that he's realized they're just as lost and insecure as him. That isn't to say he's stopped comparing himself. He still obsesses over being great. 5 actually admits that his father is smarter than him. He accepts his family's help and seeks their help instead of trying to one-man army his mission again, except for that one time. He listens to Reginald's advice on how to use his powers even when he thinks it's a stupid idea. Allison is more willing to use her powers even though she still has that fear of being judged, perhaps even correctly. But we also see her fight for her place in society, quite literally through her involvement with the civil rights movement in the 60s. Vanya knows she has powers now, but she still feels like an outsider. Her memory is gone, she finds out she nearly killed everyone, and she discovers her sexuality. But these things don't make her cave inward like they did before. Klaus uses his powers a lot more as a part of his journey towards sobriety and to become a better him. This only falls apart when the one person he was trying to be better for rejects him, and it all feels pointless again. And even though Ben accepts his powers only as an extension of following orders, this time he's doing it for his brother and not because his father made him do it. It's why his story isn't over and why there's still a lot more to explore with all of these characters. Their arcs are not finished. This is barely the start of an upswing in their character arcs. What I think is yet to come is the actual confrontation. All of these characters have finally accepted what it is that they need to work on, but now it's time to put practice to the thing that they've only really done on paper so far. So here's my prediction for season 3. This will likely be the season where we see them each tackle their insecurities head on. We'll be watching them break down, probably even more than we already have, and really confront their traumas as they come together to build themselves back up. We're probably going to be watching them break down even more than we already have. I mean, season 2 went hard, and I can only imagine how much more crazy trauma and just sadness these characters have to deal with in the upcoming season, especially now that their father has erased them from their timeline. Big change is underway, and I am so looking forward to it. Hi, Fernanda here again, this time from my editing chair. Just wanted to say thank you so much for making it to the end of this video. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. If you're interested in supporting Plot Pyramid grow at all, we have a Patreon. The link will be down below, as well as an Etsy store for workbooks, instructional workbooks on writing, writing plot, writing beginnings, writing endings, all that kind of good stuff. At our website, there's also consultations, writing consultations available for anybody who's interested with yours truly. Yeah, I'm just really excited to be posting this and to be uploading this, and I'm really excited to bring more material like this, more video analyses and other things as well, to your screen viewing pleasure. Thank you so much for watching this. I hope you stick around. Thanks. Bye.
My name is Klaus, and I'm an alcoholic. Sorry, that's the wrong meeting.